with that, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. This is the... I lost track of what number it is because I never should have numbered them in the first place. But this is a live stream, book club live stream for the first week of April for this book, Rubicon. The last years of the Roman Republic, and this is going to be covering up through pages 88. I'm still not sure. It's only worked out well for the last two books, or the first two books, I guess, that the chapters end on the page numbers I want. So I'm just going straight page numbers this time around. So up through page 88, I am on myself, page 92. So I'm just barely ahead of the curve there. Probably, depending on how many people are in the book club, there are probably, hello, sir, thank you for joining us. Probably a few people that are ahead of me, depending on when you started. The other two books I finished very quickly. Like I said, the second one I've read twice in 1 month because it was so excellent about the Donner Party, The Indifferent Stars Above. This one, Rubicon, is very information dense. I told Jordan that the first 50 pages or so I felt like was like a crash course refresher in Roman history. A lot of stuff that I didn't remember, or maybe wasn't taught, or whatever, but it was more fine detail stuff about individual rulers, consuls, I believe they're called at the time, as opposed to the large sweeping events. It gets into some stuff like that, but still dealing mostly around the main rulers of the time. Because it is so information dense, I think I'm going to try and avoid... I'm not going to do a recap because all of the names and the years and the events and everything, there's no way that I would be able to spit all of that out in a way that would make any sense or would be good, especially because we're still talking about BC right now, so the years are going in reverse. It's a lot to handle. There's no text message like we just talked about. So when we're talking about just kind of some main themes that I'm picking up from this book, right? Again, Rubicon, the final years of the Roman Republic. So this is information done. Skip the prologue, right? The prologue is like 3 or 4 pages long. If you haven't started reading it, you still have time. This one, I think, is the longest book that we're doing in the book club this year, but I've already started to enjoy it. I got scared when I was reading the prologue because I found it to be kind of boring, and I was nervous for what I had set everyone up for. But once I got to the prologue and I started reading the actual book, I found it to be much, much better, much more interesting. Tom Hollands, the name of the author, Spider-Man. As I said, we're going to be referring to him as Spider-Man. So, skip the prologue. Don't do it. I like Tom Holland, but I think that he thinks that he's really smart, and he writes a lot like I do, and I think that I'm really smart, and so that's what I'm picking up from this dude. He thinks that he's really funny. So that's how he writes. I told you it's very conversational. This book feels very relaxed in the way that he's explaining things, like you're sitting down having a conversation with him, which I appreciate because it makes it very approachable, but also can make it difficult to read just with some of the punctuation and stuff like that. Some of the way that things are written. Again, he obviously is very intelligent because his vocabulary is off the charts. It's very expansive. There have been probably a dozen times that I've had to look up what a word means or break the word apart so I can try and figure out what it means based on the context. So it is going to learn a lot of shit in this book, even if it's not about the actual history, the actual facts that are in there. This book is going to make you smarter. It's going to make all of us smarter. We're all going to benefit from this. So that's one positive thing. There's another text message. We're out here setting up shows and things like that. We got some good stuff coming for you. Not this Saturday. Next Saturday, we have episode 125. We're going to have some guests on there. I'm not going to say anything too much now, but we do have some good stuff cooking for you. I know that we've been gone for a while. So let's see the last note on the back. Spider-Man writes like I do. Lots of commas. Yeah, very long sentences. A lot of big words and stuff. I'll read a couple of things out of here. I've been doing a better job at checking things off. If you guys watch the preview or the review, which dropped the review preview that drops on the first day of the month, then you will see what I mean. So as far as the organization goes, the review of The Indifferent Stars Above went so long that it busted into the show, and I had to do a live stream preview for this book, and it was a whole deal. So reading through this, one of the first things that I picked up on is when Spider-Man is talking about the Roman pride. And I'll see if I can find the second here, because of course I didn't mark this one off, but it was relatively early. So, the Roman pride that they were talking about. Just one moment here. I went through last night and ticked off a bunch of stuff so that I could remember and have an easy time finding it. And this is what happens. So there's a map. Use the maps. That's one of the notes that I made in here, is use the maps. I found myself getting very confused trying to hang on to everything until I stopped and started using the maps. So it doesn't really matter the actual reading what I was talking about, because if you've read this, then you know what I'm referring to, that the Roman pride. The best thing that you could have in Rome was to be recognized for doing something positive. That's the only thing that you could ask for, and that's what everyone was striving for. And it reminded me a lot of a concept Colin and I have discussed regularly, which is American exceptionalism, which is something that I would describe as just kind of believing that America is the best, and that we had a right to do everything that we were doing, and it was up to us to be the world police because no one was going to do it, and that we are morally just inherently because of who we are, and that we have explained or talked about that helping lead us into many of the conflicts that we have found ourselves in as a country. So the American exceptionalism, us believing we're the best. The Romans felt very much the same way. And one thing that a difference I would draw from them, a contrast, that's the word that I was looking for, that I would draw between the Americans and the Romans. Actually, let me stop here and address this, because I think that there is going to be a lot of similarities in between the United States as it is today and how we have come to where we are, and the Roman Republic and eventually the Roman Empire. There are some things, even just interesting events within individuals themselves, that remind me a lot of modern day politicians. Again, there are going to be some large overreaching things that I think the compare contrast will be very interesting. I don't think that anyone would be surprised by that. I wasn't surprised by that, but I don't know, I'm happy for it. I'm happy to see it. Kind of, because it's also kind of terrifying. Obviously, this country doesn't exist anymore. Well, Rome does, but the Roman Empire no longer exists the way that it did then. So something happened, many things happened that led to their downfall. So it obviously has to make you ponder the downfall of America, especially in the interesting times that we find ourselves in today. Excuse me, gotta hydrate. So the contrast that I would draw between the American exceptionalism that we have talked about so much in the podcast today and the pride that the Romans felt in their home city, their home state, would be that the Roman pride existed pretty much across the board. From anybody, the moment that they were born, from the very bottom of all of the social classes to the very top, to the senators, the consuls, they all of them had a deep and overreaching and immense pride in Rome. Something that I believe did at one point exist in America when that American exceptionalism that we have talked about was still alive, when it still existed en masse in this country. I have said many times, I don't think that it's there anymore. I think American exceptionalism is dead. Whether that's a good thing or not is to be debated a completely different way. But in the contrast, that's what I was getting to. The contrast that I would draw between the Roman pride and American exceptionalism is that breed of pride that we've described as American exceptionalism really only exists today in the most hardened warriors. So you're talking about like special forces, people like that, people that were in the military that have done things that still believe rightly or wrongly that the actions they've taken in the name of this country are righteous because of one reason or another. And we could debate all day and probably for the rest of our lives, and we probably will, because of the cross that our generation has to bear of the war in the Middle East, right? We will probably debate forever whether or not those people were doing the right thing. Whether or not it was a good enough reason, the special forces, the military members who went over there, did their tours, whether or not they were doing the right thing. There are people that did that even now question whether or not they were doing the right thing. Do we have the right to be doing that? Is that America's place? And we're going to be having these conversations forever, right? But that intense and undying pride that does exist in so many of those people that served overseas and served this country in a military fashion existed amongst the vast majority of the Roman people. And it was most intense in the soldiers, which again is interesting. Not surprising, but interesting that it was the strongest in the soldiers then, and it really only exists in soldiers now today. There are still some people that are very patriotic, obviously, but that real American exceptionalism of unquestioning what was happening or what is happening, what is being done, because we have the right to do it, it's our job, and we should be doing it, generally strongest in those that have served in the military, specifically in a combat fashion. So there is, having never served in the military, I can only postulate, right? But I would assume that there is a deep tie between almost dying for your country and feeling like what you're doing is the right thing. Whether that's something you invent, these people have invented in their heads to justify that, or they really believe that, I don't know, and I wouldn't question. But I find it interesting. I think that we're going to learn a lot of stuff about America in this book. And it feels silly to say because people make comparisons between it's the last great empire, America and Rome. So it's natural for those comparisons to be made. But doing what we're doing, learning what we're learning, I just find it interesting. So let's see if I'll pick a couple of readings out of here and we'll see what we got going on, huh? So, see, this is from page 68, and this is a little reading. This part actually reminded me of Donald Trump, right? And that's why I wrote this here. And so, who are we talking about? Talking about Sulla. And so this is starting on page 67, going over to page 68. Whatever he did, however high he reached, Sulla could be confident of the protection of Venus, who granted her favorites both sex appeal and fortune. How else, after all, to explain his extraordinary rise? As a man who set great store by loyalty, he had never forgotten that he owed everything to the two women who had left him their fortunes. There's two women that, I just said it, that had an enormous amount of money, that when they died, they left it to Sulla because he was so attractive. He was romantically involved with these women. So, he had never forgotten that he owed everything to the two women who had left him their fortunes. Did this influence how he saw his relationship with Venus herself? Did he see the goddess as another woman to be seduced and worshipped in return for all she could provide? Certainly, throughout his life, Sulla deployed charm as a weapon on politicians and soldiers as much as on whores. In particular, he was adept at winning the rank-and-file legionnaires to his side. He could speak their language and enjoy their jokes, and he soon developed a reputation as an officer prepared to do his men a favor. When combined with his parallel reputation for extraordinary good luck, fostered over the years by a succession of military victories and daring personal escapades, Sulla's popularity with his troops was hardly a surprise. So they reminded me of Donald Trump because one of the big things that people talked about with Donald Trump when he was in and out, when he was coming into the presidency, was that he's an everyman. Like, people enjoyed going to his rallies because they could sit down and they could not sit down, but they could talk to him, and he felt like they were on their level, and he would say things. There were some people who were into, like, the grab by the pussy thing, and like, oh, it's like a locker room talk, things like that. Like, whether or not you agreed with it, and I'm not condoning it, but those were some of the points that people made about Donald Trump, right? So there are some leaders in kind of the ending stages of the Roman Republic that are starting to remind me of some of the modern politicians that we have now, which could be coincidence, it could be natural. I'm not sure. I don't know what that is. But there is another one in here. They're talking about someone's son, or his uncle maybe. Let me see here. I put some little checky marks on it. Sorry about this, guys. I'm getting better. That's 1 check mark. 2 check mark. Oh, goodness. Now I'm just looking through these pages on the left. Alright, I'm getting there. I promise. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. Okay. This was a judgment. This is on page 87. Talking about Crassus. Crassus' father had combined a glittering political career with the most unsensational interest in an import-export trade. Not for nothing was his family nicknamed Rich. Crassus would inherit from his father the recognition that wealth was surest foundation of power. Later, he was to be notorious for claiming that until a man could afford to maintain his own army, it was impossible for him to have too much money. This was a judgment founded on youthful experience. Fleeing his family's killers, the young Crassus had traveled to Spain, where his father's spell as governor had been immensely profitable. Even hiding out on a remote beach, the fugitive had been able to live in style, with dependents delivering food and nubile slave girls to his cave. So this part reminded me. Also, I should draw a distinction between Sula and Donald Trump. Obviously, Donald Trump never served in the military. So there are obvious distinctions here. The only thing that reminded me, the comparison I saw was, again, when I highlighted that the regular soldiers enjoyed him. They liked him. So this reminds me, Crassus and his family, reminded me a little bit of the Bidens, right? And I don't want it to sound like promoting Donald Trump and like taking shots at Joe Biden, because this isn't a positive or negative thing either way. These are just things that reminded me of him, right? And so the reason that I say this about Joe Biden is these Hunter Biden stories that are resurfacing now, because obviously they happened during the election. So we covered them then, we covered them now. We're going to continue to talk about them probably this coming week, because there are some more things going on. There are some federal investigations happening, some details, some stuff that are going on. But the corruption, right? The corruption is, there's another one. The corruption is very obvious. And it was, I don't want to say more common, more accepted in the Roman era, and so people weren't as deep about hiding it. And I don't think that there even were necessarily as many avenues to hide it then. All these show companies and stuff like that we have now didn't really exist then. But the corruption is blatant, and it's really kind of like, if you can get away with it, then you can get away with it, and we'll accept it, you know. I think part of that, I don't know, this will be interesting to explore. Part of it is the consulships, right? The leaders of Rome, there are 2 of them at a time, and they only serve for 1 year at a time. So kind of one of the complaints that we have about federal representatives now, is they only serve 2-year terms. So they're like always campaigning all of the time, which can make them very effective, but it can also make them really shilly and kind of gross to be around. Derek Kilmer is a really good example of that. Drew Hansen, really good example of that. He's a state representative in Washington, but also a good example of just a gross politician, very shilly and disgusting. So that's one thing. The consuls are constantly trying to win more things if they want to stay prominent in Roman political life, which again can be a good thing or a bad thing. So I don't want to say too much about that, obviously, because we're not that far into the book, but I think I will just reiterate that I find it not surprising. I really should have a thesaurus over when I'm doing these things, but interesting how quickly I'm drawing comparisons between the Roman Republic, because this is just such a compact history of it. Like, I feel like there's such bare detail going on that how could I have the opportunity to draw this many comparisons? But it is happening. I do feel that way. It doesn't necessarily make me feel good, because a lot of the comparisons that we hear nowadays from the United States to the Roman Republic is during the fall period. We're on the way there. These things are happening. We've talked about Douglas Murray before, where he's drawn some comparisons there. So that's again another thing that I think we'll be learning in this book, getting a better. I really got to turn my phone on silent before this. So with that, I think I'll probably end this stream here. It was a little bit of a short one, usually just because I go so long. So we will end it here. I think that's all I have on the note cards here. The next time we'll do a live stream will be next Thursday, a week from today, obviously, and we will be covering through page, let's see, I have my notes here, up through page 176. So, excuse me, get to reading, you guys. Send me some things if you have questions or just things that you found interesting. Let me know what you've enjoyed the most so far. If you have enjoyed this book, if you don't like this one, let me know. We'll try and crush it, and this will give me better feedback into what we're going to do for next year's book club, next year's set of books. So it's already looking like next year is going to be some real information-dense stuff, some research stuff for us to learn a lot. I told Colin and Jordan, I almost feel like I have to do all communist readings next year just so we can learn them and try and deconstruct them, because that's becoming so big. We might be too late on that one. I don't know. We already have until December figured out, so we'll go from there. So with that, we'll end this live stream. I want to thank everyone again for joining us. We have a few different people in here tonight, so thank you, even if you're here for just a moment. I appreciate you. Thank you for putting up with all the plakings and all the noises that my phone made. I will turn it on silent before the next one so that we don't have this issue again. So get to reading. I don't think that I said book it up to end the last review, so sorry about that. I know everyone looks forward to it. Thank you, Donovan from Salt of the Streets. I don't think I said that at the beginning, but it's okay because we'll wait a few minutes for everyone to get here anyway. I do have a shirt on underneath this sweater, I promise. It's a tank top. It was warm today. We've got the boys' hair. That's it. I'm just going on now. So thank you guys. Have an excellent evening. We'll see you this weekend or next weekend. We'll have some more content, some more clippies and stuff for you coming out. So shout out to everyone who is here. I'm just talking again, so thank you. Donovan, Salt of the Streets. Instagram.com/saltofthestreets, Facebook.com/saltofthestreets, saltofthestreets.com for all this information, Patreon.com/saltofthestreets if you want to go there, help us make more, better content. The newsletter dropped. Colin's not in this one because he was on the East Coast, but I put out an article this month. It's there. Go read it. $5. That's all that it costs. You get all of the newsletters that we've done. This is like the fourth one, I think, so there's a couple. $5 is worth that reading as it is. I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say. Go there. Patreon.com/saltofthestreets. You guys have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you later.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to